Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. So as you are all aware, we had started with the endocrine system, in which we have seen the classification of hormones as well as the mechanism by which the hormones produce their action, the general mechanism for the two types of hormones, that is water soluble and the lipid soluble hormones. So here onwards we shall consider the individual endocrine glands. So we shall see what are the different hormones which are produced by individual glands, what are their actions and how exactly they are controlled. The release of the hormones produced by these glands, how exactly it is controlled. Okay, to start with, the first gland which we shall consider is the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. Okay, now we will see why exactly we have considered both of these. Now, have you all come across this particular hypothalamus anywhere before? Yes, it is the part of brain, right? It is. So one of the four parts of the brain, that is the diencephalon, is the hypothalamus, right? It comprises of thalamus, hypothalamus and the epithalamus. Okay, so this hypothalamus, which comprises of several nuclei, it also secretes certain hormones which controls the pituitary gland. That is the reason why both these are discussed together. Okay, so earlier this pituitary gland, or as it is known as hypophysis, this was considered as the master endocrine gland. Now, why it was called as a master endocrine gland? Because it was thought to secrete a lot of hormones that control the other endocrine glands. Okay, so there are several endocrine glands which we have seen, right? So earlier it was thought that it is the pituitary gland which is regulating the secretion of hormones from all of these endocrine glands. But now it is very clear that the pituitary gland itself has another master, and that is hypothalamus. Okay, so hypothalamus also secretes a number of hormones which in turn will control the secretions of the pituitary gland, and the secretions of pituitary gland in turn will control the other endocrine glands. Okay, so it is the hypothalamus which is the actual master, which is controlling almost all of the endocrine glands. Okay, so this particular part, okay, hypothalamus, it's actually the link between the nervous system and the endocrine system, isn't it? Hypothalamus, it's a part of nervous system, correct? So it releases certain hormones which in turn will control the glands which are a part of the endocrine system. So this is a link in between these two systems. Okay, so you can say that nervous system in turn is controlling the endocrine system. Okay, so certain hormones which are released by the pituitary gland are also controlled by the hypothalamus. That's why this is considered as a link in between these two systems. Okay, so the hypothalamus, it produces 9 different hormones, and the pituitary gland, it secretes 7 types of hormones. So taken together, all of these hormones will help in regulating all the aspects of growth, development, metabolism and homeostasis of the body. Okay, so to start with the pituitary gland. Hypothalamus we have already covered under the nervous system. Okay. So, some of the nuclei are actually involved in production of certain hormones, which in turn will be regulating this pituitary gland. Okay. So, hypothalamus will not be considered again in detail, we will just focus on which are the hormones which are produced by this hypothalamus. So, this is the location of the hypothalamus as we have already seen under the CNS. This is where the hypothalamus is located, the several nuclei, and just hanging from that towards the inferior aspects lies the pituitary gland, right. Okay, so, that is your hypothalamus, and just inferior to that lies the pituitary gland, which we have already seen under the CNS as well. Okay, so, now coming to the details of this pituitary gland. Now, this pituitary gland, it is a P-shaped structure which measures round about 1 to 1.5 centimeters in diameter, and it lies in the hypophyseal fossa of the sphenoid bone. This is the sphenoid bone. So, in the hypophyseal fossa, just a depression in this particular bone lies the pituitary gland. As you can see, this is the pituitary gland. Okay, so, this particular gland, it attaches to the hypothalamus through a stalk-like structure. Also, we have considered this earlier, and that is known as infundibulum, this stalk-like structure which connects the hypothalamus with the pituitary gland, that is known as infundibulum, means a funnel. Okay. So, this gland, it is divided into two anatomical and functional regions, and that is known as the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. Okay, so, as you can see, this is the anterior pituitary and this is the posterior pituitary. So, you can say that these are the two different lobes into which this gland is divided into. So, coming to the anterior pituitary, or it is also known as anterior lobe, or it is also known as adenohypophysis. So, it is larger in size, as you can see over here, these are the two lobes, but this one is larger, right. So, this occupies around about 75% of the total weight of the gland and is mainly composed of the epithelial tissue, this particular anterior pituitary or the anterior lobe or adenohypophysis. And basically it is divided into two parts, that is pars distalis, which is the larger portion, and pars tuberalis, which forms the sheath around the infundibulum over here. Then coming to the second part of the pituitary gland, that is the posterior pituitary, or it is also known as posterior lobe, or it is also known as neurohypophysis. Okay, so names, why they are known like that, the lobes are named depending upon their position. Anterior pituitary is the one which is located towards the anterior side, front side. Posterior lobe is the one which is located on the posterior side. Okay, so that is why it is known as posterior pituitary, this one. So, as you can see that it is smaller in size and it is mainly composed of the neural tissue. The anterior pituitary, it is composed of epithelial tissue, whereas the posterior pituitary, it is composed of the neural tissue. Now, this also consists of two parts, that is pars nervosa, which is a large bulbar portion, the infundibulum. These are the two main parts of the posterior pituitary. Apart from that, even there is a third region known as pars intermedia, but this is actually not present in the adults. It atrophies, that is, this particular portion is lost during the fetal development, so that it does not develop into a separate lobe. Okay, so actually the posterior pituitary, it composes of only two portions, pars nervosa and the infundibulum. So, we shall consider the anterior pituitary in detail in today's video. Okay, so as we have seen already, anterior pituitary or adenohypophysis. This term means adeno means gland and hypophysis means undergrowth. So, just the location is inferior, that is why it is known as the adenohypophysis. Okay, so, this particular part of the pituitary gland, it secretes the hormones which regulate a lot of bodily activities, right from growth to the reproduction. Okay, and the release of the hormones which are produced by this anterior pituitary, these are stimulated by the releasing hormones and it is suppressed by the inhibiting hormones from the hypothalamus. So, actually the hormones, there are two types of hormones produced by the hypothalamus. There are certain releasing hormones, so as the name implies, releasing hormones and inhibiting hormones. So, these are the two types of hormones produced by hypothalamus. So, what these hormones will do? The releasing hormones which is produced by the hypothalamus, they will stimulate the release of the hormones from the anterior pituitary, and the inhibiting hormones, they will inhibit the release of hormones from the anterior pituitary. That is how hypothalamus is actually controlling the pituitary gland, okay, either by stimulating or inhibiting the release of the hormones which are produced by the pituitary gland. Okay. So, that is why this hypothalamic hormones, these are actually an important link in between the nervous system and the endocrine system, okay, because hypothalamus is actually the part of the nervous system. Okay. Now, before going into the actual details of the types of cells and the types of hormones which are produced by the anterior pituitary, let us understand the hypophyseal portal system. So, the hormones which are actually produced by the hypothalamus, they influence the pituitary gland because they are transmitted through this hypophyseal portal system. Okay. Now, what do you mean by this portal system? Now, usually in an arrangement of these circulatory system, we have seen that the blood, it is pumped by the heart into the arteries. From arteries, it will move into the capillaries. Capillaries will unite and they will form venules, of course, and then the veins, and the blood will flow back to the heart. That is the normal blood flow, right? But this does not happen in the portal system. What do you mean by a portal system? We have also seen hepatic portal system, isn't it? What do you mean by a portal system? A portal system is the one in which the blood flows from one capillary network into a portal vein and then into a second capillary network. Okay, so there will be capillaries from which the blood will move into the portal vein, and from here the blood will be taken again to the second set of capillaries. So, there are two capillaries which are present and these are connected by the portal vein before the blood reaches back to the heart. Usually there is only one capillary network, but in a portal system there are two capillary networks which are connected by a portal vein. Okay, so such type of portal system exists in this particular region and that is known as the hypophyseal portal system. Okay, so here the blood flows from the capillaries in the hypothalamus into the portal veins, and from here it will be carried back into another system of capillaries in the anterior pituitary. As you can see over here, this is one network of capillaries and that is another network of capillaries, right. Okay. So, there is an artery which is supplying to the hypothalamus, okay, which branches from the internal carotid artery. So, one of the branch of this internal carotid artery which is supplying to your brain. So, one of the branch is known as the superior hypophyseal artery. This is the one. So, as you can see, the oxygenated blood, it is coming towards the hypothalamus, right. So, at the junction of the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, the hypothalamus and the infundibulum, this artery is dividing into a capillary network, right, at the infundibulum. So, this capillary network into which this superior hypophyseal artery divides into is known as the primary plexus of the hypophyseal portal system. So, this is the first capillary network into which the artery is dividing. Now, from this primary plexus, the blood then drains into the hypophyseal portal vein. Remember, from one capillary it will enter into the second capillary network through the portal vein, right. So, there is a hypophyseal portal vein into which the blood will be drained, and from these portal veins again the blood will be divided into a network of capillaries, another network of capillary. Now, this is the second network of capillary in which it is entering, right, the blood is entering, and this second capillary network, it is known as the secondary plexus of hypophyseal portal system. So, these are the two capillary networks which are the part of the portal system. Okay. Now, just above the optic chiasm, which we have already considered under the CNS, there are a cluster of specialized neurons, and these are known as neurosecretory cells. Okay, as you can see over here, just superior, in the superior region, that is in the hypothalamus, specialized neurosecretory cells are present. So, these neurosecretory cells are the ones which synthesize these hypothalamic releasing and inhibiting hormones in their cell bodies. So, these hormones which are released, these are packed into the vesicles. These hormones which are packed into the vesicles, these undergo exocytosis. So, by the process of exocytosis, the hormone is released. So, how it reaches the pituitary gland? That is by diffusion into the primary plexus of the hypophyseal portal system. That is, in this capillary network, the hormones which are produced by the hypothalamic neurosecretory cells, these will diffuse into the blood vessels of these capillaries. So, from here, where will these hormones go now? Where is the blood getting drained from these capillary network? It is getting drained into the portal vein, right, and from here it reaches into the secondary plexus of the hypophyseal portal system, right. So, this is how the hormones which are produced by the hypothalamus, it reaches the pituitary gland. Even before getting distributed throughout the body, it will first reach the anterior pituitary, and that is how it will influence the pituitary cells to secrete, to release or inhibit the secretion of the hormones which are produced by the anterior pituitary. So, as a result of this, whatever signal is brought by the hormones from the hypothalamus, accordingly the hormone will be released by the anterior pituitary gland. and this in turn will influence the other endocrine gland. So that's why the hormones which are produced by the anterior pituitary, these are also known as tropic hormones, or these are also known as tropins. Okay, so in the name it will indicate that they are stimulating the release of some other hormone from some other gland. That's why these are known as tropic hormones or the tropins. Okay, now coming to the types of anterior pituitary cells and their hormones. So let us see what are the different types of cells and which are the hormones which are produced by the anterior pituitary. So there are 5 major types of anterior pituitary cells. These are somatotrophs, thyrotrophs, gonadotrophs, lactotrophs and the corticotrophs. So these 5 types of cells in all secrete 7 types of hormones. Okay. So let us consider one by one what are the different hormones which are produced by the different types of cells. So somatotrophs, these secrete a hormone called human growth hormone, HGH is the accepted short form. It is also known as somatotropin. Tropin. Remember why? Because it influences the release of some other hormone. This human growth hormone in turn will stimulate several tissues to produce insulin like growth factors. So this particular hormone in turn stimulates the body cells to grow. So it aids in general body growth and it also regulates the metabolism of the body cells. The second type of cells is thyrotrophs, which produce the hormone thyroid-stimulating hormone or TSH. This is also known as thyrotropin. Okay, thyro means pertaining to the thyroid gland. So what it will control? The TSH, it will control the secretions and other activities of the thyroid gland, which is another endocrine gland. The third type of cells are gonadotropins. Gonado means seed. So these secrete 2 gonadotropins. The hormones which are produced by these gonadotrophs are known as gonadotropins. So there are 2 gonadotropins. There are 2 hormones which are produced by this particular type of cells. That is follicle-stimulating hormone, or it is known as FSH, or luteinizing hormone is the second hormone. It is also known as LH. So both these hormones FSH and LH, they act on the gonads, that is in the reproductive system. So they may stimulate the secretion of estrogen, progesterone. They promote the maturation of the oocytes in the ovaries, also stimulate the sperm production and secretion of the testosterone in the testes. So these are all pertaining to the reproductive system. We will be studying in detail about all these in the reproductive system as well. Okay. Then considering the fourth type of cells, that is the lactotrophs. Lacto means milk. So this type of cells produce a hormone called prolactin. PRL is the accepted short form for this particular hormone. So this particular hormone, it is involved in initiation of the milk production in the mammary glands. And the fifth type of cells are the corticotrophs. So they secrete a hormone called adrenocorticotropic hormone. ACTH is the accepted short form. This hormone is also known as corticotropin. Cortico means rind of bar. Now why it is also known as corticotropin is because it stimulates the adrenal cortex to produce hormones like cortisol, which is a glucocorticoid actually. We will be coming to this when we consider the adrenal glands in detail. All these you will be studying in detail as we consider all the different types of glands. Okay, so these hormones which are produced by the pituitary gland in turn are controlling the release of several hormones from the other glands. Okay. Apart from that, certain corticotrophs also secrete one more hormone called as melanocyte-stimulating hormone or MSH. Okay. So, gonadotrophs and corticotropes. They secrete 2 hormones each, whereas all the other they produce single type of hormone, right. Somatotropes, they produce human growth hormone, right. Thyrotropes, they release TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. Gonadotropin are produced by gonadotropes, that is the FSH and LH. Lactotropes, they produce the prolactin, PRL is the acceptor, and corticotropes, they produce ACTH and melanocyte-stimulating hormone. Okay. So, before going into the individual hormones, let us consider the control of secretion by the anterior pituitary. How exactly the secretions from the anterior pituitary gland are controlled. Okay, so, these secretions of hormone from the anterior pituitary, these can be regulated by 2 ways. The first way is by the hormones which are produced by the hypothalamus. Remember the neurosecretory cells in the hypothalamus, they produce releasing hormones and inhibiting hormones, right. So, they produce 5 types of releasing hormone which stimulate the release of certain type of hormone from the anterior pituitary gland, and there are 2 inhibiting hormones which are released by the hypothalamus. So, they will suppress the secretion of certain anterior pituitary hormones. And the second method by which the secretion of hormones from the anterior pituitary is controlled is by the negative feedback. Now, what do we mean by negative feedback? So, negative feedback in terms of the levels of the hormones of which release it is promoting. Okay. So, usually this happens in 3 types of the cells, that is the thyrotropes, gonadotropes and the corticotropes. Okay. So, these in turn will be producing a type of hormone which will go and stimulate some other gland to produce the hormones, right. Say for example, one example we shall consider, it will make it more clearer. Say for example, let us consider the corticotropin. This is one of the hormone produced by the corticotropes, right, that is ACTH. What is the function of ACTH? It stimulates the production of glucocorticoid, right, that is a cortisol is one of the example of glucocorticoid. So, secretion of cortisol from the adrenal cortex is promoted by ACTH, right, from the anterior pituitary. Now, what do you mean by negative feedback? When these levels of cortisol will be high, what will happen? When they go above normal, what will happen? They will have a negative feedback. As you can see this dotted line, what does it indicate? Inhibition. So, it will inhibit the release of corticotropin or ACTH. That is how it will control the release of the hormones from the anterior pituitary. Okay. So, one method is from the releasing or inhibiting hormones which are produced by hypothalamus, and the hormones produced by these 3 types of cells, thyrotropes, gonadotropes and corticotropes. These are controlled by mainly the negative feedback through the levels of the hormones of which it is controlling the release of. Okay. In turn, the elevated levels of cortisol, increase in the level of cortisol will also inhibit the release of corticotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. Corticotropin releasing hormone means what? It is a releasing hormone which will promote the release of corticotropin from the anterior pituitary, right. Okay, so, this will also get inhibited. As a result of this, what will happen? It will inhibit the release of this corticotrophin. As a result of this, what will happen? There will be inhibition of release of the cortisol and it will come back to normal. So, this is a negative feedback which in turn will control the release of hormones from the anterior pituitary. Okay, so, let us consider all these 7 types of hormones which are released by the anterior pituitary. Coming to the first one, that is the human growth hormone. The hormone which is produced by the somatotrophs, which are the most numerous type of cells. So, a lot of amount of the human growth hormone will be released. So, this is the most plentiful hormone of the anterior pituitary gland. Now, the main function of this human growth hormone is to promote the synthesis and secretion of small protein hormones called as insulin like growth factors. IGF is the accepted short form for this, or these are also known as somatomedins. Okay, so what is the role of human growth hormone? This in turn is causing the release of another hormone, right? That is the insulin like growth factor. That is what the function of the hormones of anterior pituitary gland, right? They cause the release of some other hormones, right, from some other endocrine glands. So, in response to this human growth hormone, the cells in the liver or skeletal muscles, cartilage, bones and other tissues, they in turn will start releasing this insulin like growth factors. So, these growth factors which are produced by different types of tissues, this in turn will enter into the bloodstream and they will act locally on other tissues. It may act as autocrines or paracrines, that means it will act on the same cells which are producing it, or it may act on the neighboring cells. So, what are the functions of this IGF? Insulin like growth factors. So, let us consider all the functions of this insulin like growth factors. So, it promotes the growth and multiplication of the cells by taking up the amino acids into the cells and increasing the protein synthesis. They also decrease the breakdown of proteins and utilize the amino acids for ATP production. So, ATP production is promoted. So, because of these actions, it promotes the growth rate of the skeleton and the skeletal muscles, especially in the childhood. Apart from that, in the adults, this human growth hormone and the IGF, it helps to maintain the mass of the muscles and the bones. Usually in the adults, the bones do not grow, right, or the muscles do not grow usually, okay, but it helps in maintaining the mass of this muscles and bones. Also, it promotes the healing of the injuries and tissue repair. Next function of IGF is it enhances the lipolysis in the adipose tissue, that is breakdown of the lipids. So, this will result in release of fatty acids. So, this can be utilized for ATP production by the body cell. Now, in addition to affecting the protein and lipid metabolism, these can also influence the carbohydrate metabolism by decreasing the glucose uptake. So, this will decrease the use of glucose for the ATP production by most of the body cells. So, also it may stimulate the liver cells to release the glucose in the blood. Okay, so, these are the several functions which may be carried out by the insulin like growth factor. Now, how exactly these hormones are controlled, the release of the hormone, of the human growth hormone, how exactly it is controlled? So, usually it is by the two hypothalamic hormones, as we have seen, that releasing hormone, growth hormone, releasing hormone, GHRH, which is produced by the hypothalamus. This can promote the secretion of the human growth hormone, and the growth hormone inhibiting hormone, GHIH, what it will do? As the name implies, it will suppress the release of this growth hormone. And the major regulator of the release of growth hormone releasing hormone and growth hormone inhibiting hormone, that is the blood glucose level. So, blood glucose level in turn is controlling the secretion of the hormones from the hypothalamus, which in turn is controlling the release of the human growth hormone. So, let us see how exactly this blood glucose level is controlling the release of the growth hormone. Okay. Say for example, when the glucose levels are low, that condition is known as hypoglycemia, and abnormally low blood glucose levels. So, this will stimulate the hypothalamus to secrete the growth hormone releasing hormone. So, low levels of blood glucose stimulates the hypothalamus to release the GHRH. So, once this hormone reaches the pituitary, anterior pituitary, it will stimulate the release of the human growth hormone. So, green, it indicates the stimulation. Okay, so, here it is stimulating the release of human growth hormone. Now, this human growth hormone, it will in turn cause the secretion of insulin like growth factors. So, this will speed up the breakdown of liver glycogen into glucose. So, glycogen, which is the stored form of glucose, correct? So, this will be broken down. So, as a result of this, the glucose molecules will be released into the blood. So, as a result of this, the blood glucose level will rise to normal level, that is around about 90 milligrams per 100 ml of plasma. So, it will cause a rise in the blood glucose level. Now, when this blood glucose level, it goes on increasing, what will happen? A time will come where it will go beyond the normal level, right? It will increase beyond the level. That condition is called as hyperglycemia. So, this condition will in turn will result in inhibition of the growth hormone releasing hormone. Okay. So, it will be inhibited. This release of growth hormone releasing hormone will stop. So, what will happen? Release of human growth hormone will also be stopped, and all these processes will be stopped. On the other hand, the hyperglycemia, if it is produced, that is abnormally high level of glucose levels, this will stimulate the hypothalamus to produce growth hormone inhibiting hormone. So, this when reaches the anterior pituitary, it will result in inhibition of the release of human growth hormone. So, it will be inhibited. This release will not take place. So, as a result of low levels of human growth hormone, what will happen? IGF will not be produced. So, IGF levels will also reduce. So, decreased IGF level will slow down the breakdown of glycogen in the liver. So, what will happen to your blood glucose level? As a result of this, blood glucose level will fall back to normal. It was high, right? So, it will come back to normal. So, when this process continues, what will happen? The levels of glucose may go below normal, right? Hypoglycemia will be produced. So, this in turn will inhibit the release of growth hormone inhibiting hormone. So, as a result of this, all the processes will be inhibited. So, this is how the growth hormone release can be controlled. Apart from that, there are several other stimuli like decreased fatty acid level, increased amino acid level, deep sleep wherein eye movement is less, increased activity of sympathetic system of the autonomic nervous system. Also certain other hormones like glucagon, estrogen, cortisol and insulin, all of these can stimulate the release of human growth hormone. And the factors which inhibit the release of human growth hormone, these include increased level of fatty acid, decreased level of amino acids, rapid eye movements, emotional deprivation, obesity, low levels of thyroid hormone and the high levels of the human growth hormone itself due to negative feedback mechanism. Okay. In turn, there is one more inhibitor, that is growth hormone inhibiting hormone from the hypothalamus. This is also inhibiting the release of human growth hormone. So, this is how the release of human growth hormone can be controlled. The second type of hormone which is produced by anterior pituitary is thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH, which is produced by the thyrotropes. So, this in turn stimulates the synthesis and secretion of two thyroid hormones, that is triiodothyronine, that is T3, and thyroxine, that is T4. Okay, both can be produced by the thyroid gland. Okay, and in turn the release of this TSH can be controlled by the hypothalamus, right. So, this hormone which is produced by thyrotropes, it can be released by the hormone thyrotropin releasing hormone, which is produced by the hypothalamus. So, it will promote the release of TSH from the thyrotropes, and this TRH levels in turn will depend upon the level of T3 and T4. So, T3 and T4 are the thyroid hormones, release of which is promoted by TSH, right. So, high levels of T3 and T4, what will happen if there are high levels of these hormones? Obviously, it will inhibit the release of TRH. In turn, it will inhibit the release of TSH through the negative feedback mechanism. There is no thyrotropin inhibiting hormone which is produced. To certain extent, growth hormone inhibiting hormone is controlling this inhibition of the TSH. Next hormone produced by the anterior pituitary is the follicle-stimulating hormone by the gonadotropins. In case of females, this particular hormone act on the ovaries. So, each month there are several ovarian follicles which will grow, and this growth is initiated by the FSH. So, the secretory cells which are present around the developing oocyte, which will turn out into a gamete. We will be talking about all this in detail in the reproductive system. So, the growth of this follicle is promoted by the FSH. Also, this FSH promotes the secretion of other hormones like estrogen, that is the female sex hormone. And in case of males also, FSH will stimulate the sperm production, which is a male gamete. Okay, so, the production of sperm in the testis, that is the main gonads, it will be promoted by the FSH. Okay. Now, likewise for FSH also there is a releasing hormone, that is gonadotropin releasing hormone GnRH, which is produced by the hypothalamus. It will stimulate the release of the FSH by the gonadotropes. Okay. And the release of these two hormones GnRH and FSH, these can be suppressed by the estrogen levels. There is no inhibiting hormone, right. Suppression of secretion does not take place, there is no inhibiting hormone. What is inhibiting the release of this? Due to the negative feedback mechanism, the levels of the estrogen, the secretion of which is promoted by the FSH, right. So, a negative feedback mechanism will be involved, and in the male it will be the testosterone hormone, which will inhibit the release of GnRH and in turn the FSH. Then the next hormone is the luteinizing hormone, one more hormone produced by the gonadotropes. So, in case of females, luteinizing hormone or LH, it triggers the ovulation, that is the release of the secondary oocyte, the gamete. Okay, that process is known as ovulation. Okay. Also, this LH stimulates the formation of corpus luteum. Okay, that is the structure which is formed after the ovulation has taken place. Okay. Also, the secretion of progesterone by the corpus luteum is also under the control of luteinizing hormone. So, together both these FSH and the LH, they also stimulate the release of estrogen by the ovarian cells. As we have seen under the FSH, it promotes the release of estrogen. So, similarly, luteinizing hormone also promotes the release of estrogen. So, both these estrogen and progesterone, both these hormones which are produced in the females, they prepare the uterus for the implantation. If at all the fertilization has taken place, the implantation, it takes place under the influence of these hormones which are stimulated by both the FSH and the LH. And in case of males, the LH It stimulates the cells in the testes to secrete the hormone testosterone. Okay, so in turn it is controlling the secretion of the other hormones. Okay, now just like the FSH, as we have seen, the luteinizing hormone, its release can also be controlled by the gonadotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, and there is no inhibiting hormone. Okay. Then the next hormone is the prolactin, which is produced by the lactotropes. So prolactin or PRL, together with the other hormones, it will help in milk production. So as such, alone it has a weak effect, but along with the estrogen, progesterone, glucocorticoid, human growth hormone, thyroxine and insulin, prolactin will bring about the milk production. And the ejection of the milk from the mammary glands, that is actually under the control of oxytocin, which is a posterior pituitary hormone. Okay. So together the milk production and ejection, this particular phenomenon is known as lactation, which is associated with the child. Now again there are releasing and inhibiting hormone. Actually this prolactin releasing hormone, it's thought to exist, but exact role is not known. Okay, releasing hormone means it will promote the release of the prolactin, right? Whereas there is inhibiting hormone as well, prolactin inhibiting hormone, PIH, which is actually dopamine. So this will inhibit the release of the prolactin. So during the menstruation, okay, the menstrual cycle, as the menstruation begins, the secretion of the PIH, that is the prolactin inhibiting hormone, that will be decreased. So as a result of this, what will happen? The levels of prolactin will rise, right? It's an inhibiting hormone. So what will happen to prolactin levels? It will increase. So this will produce the tenderness in the breast during the menstruation. Okay, milk production will not take place, but tenderness will be produced. And as the new menstrual cycle begins, the prolactin inhibiting hormone, it is secreted again. So because of this, the level of prolactin will be decreased. Then during the pregnancy, the prolactin levels again rise, okay, due to the increase in the level of PIH. Okay. Even the suckling action of the infant in the breastfeeding mothers, this will also cause a reduction in the secretion of the PIH. So as a result of decrease in this, what will happen to the prolactin levels? It will be increased. So it will promote the lactation. Okay, so in the males as such, the function of prolactin is not known, but hypersecretion may result in impotence, that is erectile dysfunction may take place. Okay. Whereas in case of females, the hypersecretion of prolactin, it may cause the galactorrhea, inappropriate lactation, or amenorrhea, that is absence of menstrual cycle, may also take place, because appropriate levels of the hormones are very important. And the next hormone is the adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH, which is produced by the corticotropes. So this controls the production and secretion of the cortisol, which is one of the glucocorticoid, which is produced by the adrenal cortex. So just like others, there is also a corticotropin releasing hormone, the example which we have seen. So this is the hormone released by the hypothalamus, so it will stimulate the secretion of ACTH by the corticotropes. Apart from that, even the stress related stimuli such as the low blood glucose level, physical trauma and interleukin 1, these also stimulate the release of ACTH, and there is no inhibiting hormone over here. Okay. So what will inhibit the release of this hormone? Yes, it will be controlled by the negative feedback mechanism through the levels of glucocorticoids. So if there are high levels of glucocorticoids, what will happen? It will inhibit the release of the corticotropin releasing hormone, which in turn will cause the release of ACTH. That is what we have seen in the example, right. And the next hormone is the melanocyte-stimulating hormone or MSH. Now, this particular hormone actually increases the pigmentation of the skin. The exact role of this hormone is not known, but then it may be involved in certain brain activities. The administration of this hormone has caused the darkening of the skin. So, it is relating to the pigmentation of the skin. Now, there is a releasing hormone, corticotropin releasing hormone, which is actually causing the release of MSH, and there is an inhibiting hormone, that is the dopamine. Dopamine inhibits the release of the MSH. Okay. So, this is how the MSH release can be controlled. So, to summarize, the human growth hormone, also known as somatotropin, this is the target tissue, mainly the liver. So, it will stimulate the liver cells of muscle, cartilage, other tissues to synthesize the insulin like growth factors, which in turn will promote the body cell growth, repair, lipolysis, etc. Thyroid stimulating hormone or TSH is also known as thyrotropin, acts on thyroid gland to stimulate the synthesis and secretion of thyroid hormones by the thyroid gland. FSH, it mainly acts in the ovaries and testes. In case of females, it will help in development of the oocyte, secretion of the several hormones like estrogen, progesterone, and in case of males, it will stimulate the sperm production in the testes. Luteinizing hormone, it again acts in ovaries and testes. In case of females, it helps in production of the estrogen and progesterone, ovulation and the formation of corpus luteum, and in case of males, it stimulates the testes to produce testosterone. Prolactin, it acts on the mammary glands. So, together with the other hormones, it promotes the milk production by the mammary glands. Next hormone, ACTH, also known as corticotropin, acts on the adrenal cortex to secrete the glucocorticoid. And the last hormone, melanocyte stimulating hormone or MSH, acts in the brain. It might be involved in the brain activity. Apart from that, it causes the darkening of the skin. Okay. So, this is to do with the anterior pituitary and the different hormones which are produced by the anterior pituitary gland. Okay, so, we will be dealing with the posterior pituitary in the next video. This is the reference. Thank you for watching.